Coming up on episode 46 of Create If Writing, we're talking about how to find your perfect audience.
I can't go back to sleep, it's almost light. These restless thoughts have kept me up again tonight.
Hello and welcome to Create If Writing. This is the podcast for writers and bloggers who want to build an online platform without being smarmy. And I'm your host, Kirsten Oliphant. I'm really excited that you are here, and we are kicking off a maybe 4-week series. I have it mostly planned out, a 4-week series or so on finding your perfect audience. And I say mostly because I am kind of getting feedback from people and will be adjusting things as needed and maybe adding an extra one in, or if things kind of fit better together, I'll be doing that. So it's not that I'm not planning. It's just that I always leave room for contingencies. That's what happens when you're a worst case scenario person. So I'm excited that you're here today, and we're going to be talking about kind of the first step in finding your perfect audience, which is such a huge thing. And I found people are talking about this, but I don't know. I'm just not finding the kinds of things that were really helpful to me. And so I'm hoping to take some of the things I found that are good resources and then create something that will help you. Because again, I feel like people talk about this idea all the time, that you need to do it, but I don't see the kind of resources that really helped me to hone in on this. So before I get into the meat of that today, and I need to stop saying that. I don't know. People use that term. It just grosses me out in the podcast. So before I get into the main portion, I'm going to find a new word for that. Next week, I'll have it. I want to just give a few brief things. I want to say a thank you to Jasmine Commerce, who does our music. I always say this at the end, but in case you don't listen all the way to the end, Jasmine is a fabulous singer-songwriter who lives in California, and I hope to actually have her on the podcast to talk to her about her writing process and what it's like to make kind of a full-time income, or to try to make a full-time income as a creative artist and singer-songwriter. So she's fantastic. You can find more of her songs, which are lovely, at jasminecommercemusic.com. And she's just, I just love her music, and I'm so glad she lent it to the show. Also, if you want to go deeper with this whole idea of finding your perfect audience, or FYPA, F-Y-P-A, you need to be subscribed to my email, where I already started last week by sending out some questions and thoughts and links based on what we're going to talk about today, or at least the first part of what we're talking about today. And we're also talking about this more and keeping the conversation going in our Facebook community. So you can subscribe by going to createifwriting.com/subscribe. Pretty simple. And then also you can find our Facebook community by going to createifwriting.com/community. And exciting news about our community, I actually have just brought on a community manager. And you might be thinking, the group is not that big. We're just almost to 400 people now. And it's not that I can't manage it, but I had one of our group members who's super active kind of approach me, and we started having some conversations about him taking over as kind of like a community manager. And so I'm calling him the community wizard of the highest order or something kind of silly like that. But he is going to be doing a lot of threads about group discussions, and he already has been doing this. We kind of tested it out for a week, and he did a really great job. We have never had such good discussions, and he was hopping in and I was hopping in, because I'm still going to, it's not that I'm leaving my group because it's my group, but it's really nice to have an extra set of hands and eyes and just another person to spark conversations and keep things going. So that's going to be the first step, and some other steps I have to keep this group more of a community, because that's really what I envision. And I know, it's formed around Create If Writing and the podcast and the things that I'm doing, but that doesn't mean I'm some kind of weird dictator and want to have like all the things be circle back to me. I don't want that. I want the group to really be a community and thriving in terms of inspiration and the things that we all bring to the table. So a big shout out and thank you to Matt McCarrick of phosphorusproject.com. He is a really fantastic guy and just doing a really stand-up job of community management and wizardry over in Create If Writing. Thank you so much, Matt. I'm so glad to have you. Let's get into talking about FYPA, finding your perfect audience. And if you want the show notes for this, it's going to be createifwriting.com/046. The first thing when it comes to finding your perfect audience is I think something people miss. And so we're taking a step back, and I feel like I am like a broken record with certain things that I talk about. So if you've ever been to my free trainings or taken one of my courses, this is no surprise to you, but we're going to go back and talk about your why, because this really, really, really matters. And I'll talk a little bit about my history, kind of blogging, and this may be familiar to some of you, but I got my MFA, which is a Master in Fiction, in 2007, and got out of school. We moved back to Houston. We had been in Greensboro, North Carolina. Hello, North Carolina people. And we moved back here, and I had a manuscript I was working on. I had an agent that was really interested. I got everything done, and I think I finished it after Sawyer was born. I definitely know there's a baby in there. And so in the blur of that first year of having a baby, I was putting the finishing touches on a manuscript, sending it off to my agent, who sent it off to publishers who loved it and then didn't buy it. And, publishing, they don't say they love it if they don't. I mean, they don't inflate your ego. So it wasn't like that they were lying. And it was one of those like things where you're tone deaf and no one will tell you, but it was too risky as a first time author. It's a little more literary. So it wasn't, even though it had a great story, it wasn't a page turner in terms of like those easy throwaway kind of novels. And there's just nothing you can do after that. And so for me, that began kind of a big pause on my fiction writing, because then we had another kid, and I still have an agent out there who's like, I'm going to read your next thing because people are interested. They liked your voice. They want to hear more, but they just didn't want this story. But it's both really discouraging and also just really hard with kids, I have found, for me to write fiction. And so I had been writing this blog all about pregnancy and having a baby, and it was mostly like a lot of blogs, like an online diary. I just threw up posts on there, and I assumed it was my mom reading and like two of my friends, and actually found a bunch of random readers. And I don't know how people found blogs back then, because you didn't post anything on social media at all. Like I had a Facebook account, but you didn't put your blog on there. That would be weird. So you just randomly found people, or they found you. And I didn't really think about who my audience was. I didn't think about what they wanted to read. I just wrote what I felt like writing. And so that was my blog for years, until I finally realized, as things in the blogging world kind of shifted, I sort of realized that I had no purpose behind what I was doing. I never edited. I just wrote things and then hit post. They didn't all have images, or it just was a very different world back then of how blogs looked anyway. But I also just kind of kept my head in the sand. I didn't think about my readers, didn't think about what other bloggers were doing. I just did what I wanted. And, my blog got to a certain point and grew on its own, and then kind of stopped and stagnated. And I realized also that if I published a book and people came to my home website, this was not a great representation of my writing. I think they would be confused, like, well, her writing in her books is really good, and then there's this weird blog, and it just didn't go together. So I started becoming more intentional, and then I kind of dabbled in, I realized you could make money blogging. This was new. I'd made a little bit with ads, but not much. I just kind of had an ad on my site from BlogHer. So I started doing sponsored posts and realizing I can make like a couple $1,000s a month sometimes doing sponsored posts and ads. And I hated it. It's when I realized after a little bit of time that it just didn't feel like me. And it felt like, again, my long game is writing books and being in the space of writers and thinking about what it would be like to go back to your favorite author's blog and have all these sponsored posts about diapers. And it just didn't make sense to me. And so I really kind of became more intentional through time, and I made a lot of mistakes along the way and realized I had to really think about who my readers were, who I wanted to be, and who I was, and what I was kind of willing to give up, what I wasn't willing to give up. And so, and I think it's a constant wrestling battle, and I go back and forth between some of the decisions that I make about posts I will write for money or product or won't write, what kind of ads I want on my site, if any. And I have a couple of sites, and it's been really nice when I launched Create If Writing, because it's so much more focused that it was like, because if you do know your purpose and your audience, it is so much easier to come up with content and make these decisions because you're not having to consider over and over again. So this finding your perfect audience, it's really important for growth, but it's also like a shortcut. It makes your life so much easier. So other mistakes I made besides not being intentional, B, not thinking at all about who my readers were, what they wanted to read. I made mistakes even in things like my freebie to grow my email list. I knew you needed to do that. And so A lot of bloggers recommended just putting together some posts and making a book into that, which I think is a great idea, or it can be. But what I did is my blog was really eclectic. I wrote about all kinds of things, and I chose one kind of post because they were kind of more well written and they were about faith. And I put all those together in a book called Church Isn't Cute, which I love. You can find it on Amazon right now. And Church Isn't Cute was, I was really proud of the work I did there, and that was my freebie, but my audience was not primarily Christian. It was probably half, maybe. And so there were two problems with offering that as a freebie. One, it did not attract half of my readers, just flat out the end. And the other thing was, it sort of set the expectation that that's what I was going to write about when I sent my weekly emails. And it's not always what I write about when I send my weekly emails. And so it was not an intentional choice. It was not a bad, it's, again, I really like the book. I love the things I wrote in there, but it's not for everybody. And so it's not a good freebie to get everybody on my email list. And so I changed it to a survival guide for moms. And it's kind of a humorous, like what to do when people ask you if you're pregnant and you're not pregnant, like just silly, not all silly, but just kind of tongue in cheek, I guess, looks at, parenting things. And the majority of what I write is kind of in the parenting sphere on that blog. And so that is a much better magnet. And also kind of, I do like to write with a little bit of humor, a little bit of tongue in cheek, laughing at our family and the things that happen to us. And so that was a much better fit for my audience. And so it really matters what you're offering, what you're producing, what kind of content you're creating based on kind of who you want to be seen as and also who your audience is. Okay, so the questions that I want to think about, and actually before I get to those, I put them in the quick fix last week, and then I've got some extra ones for you. One more example, not from me, because I think you don't need to hear all about my life in these, but I want to talk about Andrea Beltrami, or Dre, and she is the branded solopreneur. And I know some of you guys listening know her because I've done an interview with her on the Blogger to Business podcast. I also had her on the Profitable Blogging Summit, and I love her. She's fantastic, she's funny, and she's really great at branding. So part of her brand, though, is that she is just kind of a keep it real girl. She calls her Facebook community their badasses, and that's part of who she is. But after the summit, I did get an email from someone who said they liked her session, but they had a problem with the cursing. And she really didn't cuss all that much, honestly. But for people who do not want cursing or don't think that belongs in business, which is what this person felt. Also, they were listening out loud with kids in the house. And I can understand, like, as a mom with kids in the house, like, I have to be really careful what podcasts I'm listening to, like true crime podcasts are only in the earphones because my kids can't hear that stuff. So I understand that there was no warning. And I would definitely have Dre again and not say anything to her about the cussing because that doesn't bother me, but I will put a warning next time. But it was kind of revealing to me in terms of, like, Dre is fantastic and she knows her branding stuff, but her ideal audience may not be the kind of people who can't handle being called a badass. And so she knows who she is. She's not changing to bring in those other people. She's embracing who she is and knows that embracing who she is going to help her attract the people that want to be called badasses and want to be in her group. And this is probably the most I will ever say badass on my show. So last time there it was, but it really is important to know yourself because I think that helps you to know better who your audience is because you know yourself, you know the kind of people you are going to draw in. Now, this has always been challenging to me because as I've mentioned with my lifestyle blog being all over the place, I really am all over the place. I am a little bit eclectic in all the things in life, the things I like, the people I'm friends with. I've always had groups of friends from all across the boards. That's just kind of who I am. And so for me, narrowing down audience has always been particularly difficult because I find too, as I get to know my audience, it is also all over the board. And so I really struggle with this idea of nailing down and picking, like, as people will say to do, picking one person and giving her a name or him a name and knowing where they shop and what they do and how much money they have. That is always a struggle for me. And so as we go through the series of VIPA, I want to always keep that in mind because I think the flip side of knowing your perfect audience is you also have to know that your audience is going to be way more diverse than that one person. Now, you could maybe sum up the majority of your audience with that one person. But for me, I find it so important to get to know my people. And that's part of a hallmark of who I want to be and what I want to do. But my people are all over the place. Again, I have Christians in my audience, and in our Facebook group and community, I have people who are not Christians. I had somebody email me this week and tell me that I was a badass like 8 times in an email. So, oops, did it again. That was the last time. But, I really do attract people, I think, from an eclectic variety, and that's part of who I am. And so for me, I have had to continually think about my target audience, but also I like to also keep in mind when I'm writing particular people that I know of who are also reading, because I think, or listening to the podcast, for example, because I think it's really important to keep those people in mind to think about what they're listening to. So while I really do like the advice to have a particular audience and to know yourself, know your audience, and I'm going to be talking about that for a couple weeks. Clearly, I think it's important. I also think it can be just as important to really know your people if you have that kind of relationship with them, and to keep those other people in mind that maybe are not your target that you are reaching for, but they're like, I have some serious true fans who are not what maybe my perfect audience member would look like if I were to define it. And yet, there's somebody I know is going to read every email. They're going to respond to my emails. They're going to buy my products and my books. I know that. So keep that in mind as well, that I don't think we should all just drink the water of find your target audience, make this clear avatar of what they eat and drink and when they go to bed, and then write just for that. I think for me, I feel like it's really important also to consider that there is going to be some diversity, and consider, I don't want to water everything down. And I don't think that's what I mean at all. I don't think that's what you have to do. I do think that's a mistake you can make, is trying to speak to too many people. But for me, because I know my people, I also keep them in mind. So let's talk about some questions that I asked last week in the Quick Fix. And again, if you're not subscribed to my email, which I call the Quick Fix, it comes out every Thursday, that's where you're going to get the information about live trainings we're going to do. We'll have a couple this month, and the questions of the week and more. So last week in the Quick Fix, I asked 3 questions. The first is, what is your main purpose or goal? And then I also asked, what are your secondary or even tertiary, which is a fancy way of saying third or fourth, goals? And then, now I can't remember the third question that I asked. Oh, where do you want to see yourself in a year? So those are the questions that I asked, and we kind of discussed that more in the Facebook group. And I'm going to add a question to that. So let me repeat those again, because if you did not get the Quick Fix or have not thought about this, this is really important to know who you are to help define your audience. So the first was, what is your main overarching purpose? Are you blogging or writing because you love it? Are you trying to get a book deal? Are you wanting to make money for your family? Are you just wanting a creative outlet? Are you trying to bring encouragement to people or empower certain people? What is the overarching main purpose? And then those secondary goals, might be, maybe the other side of that is you want to encourage people, but also you'd like to make a little side income. Or it could be flipped. Your main purpose is you have to make money, but you'd like to make money by encouraging people. So think about those purposes, because they often work together. And sometimes you have more than one. There should be a main one, and then the others should kind of fall behind or work together with it. And then where do you want to see yourself in a year, I think is an important question when you think of this, because I think it helps you. If you're struggling to kind of identify that main purpose, that can help you hone that in and also help you kind of think more clearly about your goals. The next thing that I did not talk about in the Quick Fix, but is actually in the show notes that we're talking about, is what is your theme? And that is a weird question, right? So funny story, when I was an English major in college, and I've always loved reading and writing, but I realized in high school, I did not know as much as I thought I did. And I'm the kind of person that sometimes can think I know a lot, especially as a firstborn. I was such a know-it-all kid. And so I got to, honors English in high school and thought I knew everything. And I got an F on an Old Man and the Sea paper, an F. I don't think I'd ever gotten an F in school before. And my mother was enraged, and we went and had a conference with the teacher. And she just said, what is happening here? What is this F? And the teacher said, well, the assignment was to write about a theme in The Old Man and the Sea. And Kirsten wrote a plot summary. And I realized in that moment, I did not know what a theme was. I thought a theme was the plot. So I learned a lot from my wonderful honors English teachers and from failing my first high school English paper. about what I didn't know and what I needed to know. And by the time I got out, I had really learned how much I didn't know and had really learned a ton and had even a more renewed and strong love for writing and reading. Thank you so much to Mrs. Pilkington, Ms. Moore, Ms. Saunders, and Mrs. Gunter. You guys were amazing. So theme is not plot. When you're reading a book, plot is like the storyline. The theme, it's kind of like the main idea. And often there's more than one, and you could write a paper on all kinds of themes, like the theme of light and darkness or good and evil, the theme of, caring for others above yourself. There's all kinds of themes, in literature and in books. So when it comes to your blog, your business, your kind of overall purposes and goals, the theme, it sounds a little weird, but it's really important. Your theme is kind of like your vibe, your attitude, the main idea that pulls everything together. So I'm going to go back to my lifestyle blog. Again, it's at KirstenOliphant.com. And that's where I write about all the crazy stuff. And as I was coming to, and I say crazy stuff because my life is nuts, you guys. As I came to kind of figure out what my main purpose was and what I was writing, I was trying to figure out, okay, what ties all this stuff together that I'm writing? What is the main thing that, I can say, main theme? Because people are always saying niche down. I did not want to change what I was writing about. I wanted to be able to write about the random things I wanted to write about. And I still do. And I still hold fast to that. So I thought, well, if I'm going to write about whatever, and, my readers could show up one day and it's a recipe, and the next day and I'm talking about, a current event or faith something, and then the next day I'm talking about parenting, there has to be a theme. And in some ways the theme is me because I'm tying the things together. But I realize more than that, it's sort of the theme of how I look at all of these things, kind of the lens that I use to define all these events and the crazy things I'm writing about. And that lens became to me what is the tagline on that blog: an eclectic celebration of chaos. So I'll break that down for you because there are some kind of weird words, but this is perfect for me, even if it's a little bit odd and you might have to read it twice. Eclectic means all over the place, essentially, a gathering of maybe unlike things. And then celebration is where I am constantly wanting to find the joy and to celebrate the weirdness of life and the randomness of the things that I talk about. So I want to try to pull in a joy and a sense of looking at, even the hard things sometimes that happen. I do write about hard things too, but trying to find the joy in those and trying to find a way to laugh at some of the silly things that happen and the parenting things that sometimes make me want to cry. Writing about them in a humorous way helps me not cry about them, but to laugh. And then the chaos, when you have 4 kids, it's just chaos. And so my life is constantly chaos. And I feel like sometimes I even have more than other people. Like we have just, how some people are like drama queens and they just have all that drama. We're not really dramatic, but we do have just totally bizarre things. Like I feel like more than most people that happen to us. And I feel like it's kind of a gift. Like I look at them as a gift because it's something I can write about and laugh about and just say, well, here's the weird thing that happened to us this week. The eclectic celebration of chaos, that's kind of the theme. I'm going to talk about eclectic things. It's going to be chaotic. And I want the theme to be a celebration of that. A celebration in the midst of chaos and in the difficulties of parenting. A celebration in the midst even of the hard things. And even in my posts about food and that have recipes, that there's a story to it and hopefully tying in that main theme. So I hope that kind of helps. And I think the theme, as I've continued to hone things down for creative writing, because as much as I started focused and knowing what I wanted to do, it also has developed organically. I think as I've gotten to know more what's important to me and as I've grown more to know my audience, and you'll be not surprised to hear that I think one of the themes of creative writing, or maybe the main theme, is how to build the platform without being smarmy and how to be authentic and to maybe even sell things or maybe make a living doing what you love without feeling like you're selling your soul. And so I think that that's the theme behind things, is an authenticity and maybe a transparency, but still trying to work really hard and to do the work you want to do as a business. I hope that those kind of examples give you a better idea of what a theme is. And why I think that matters as well, it's the same reason that why who you are matters, because you are going to attract the people that are lining up with those kind of same goals that you have. You're going to attract people who understand and feel and are drawn to that kind of theme. I'm not going to draw people in who are wanting kind of a really pretty, just perfect lifestyle, Martha Stewart kind of blog. Those people are not going to read my lifestyle blog. And people who are just out to make $100,000 on their next whatever are probably not going to be drawn to my blog, because I'm not going to promise that. I'm not going to teach that. And I don't think anybody should promise that, but that's another story. So you're going to start attracting the right kind of audience by embracing and knowing who you are and knowing the theme of kind of what you do and the underlying purpose. So I feel like this week's challenge to think about your theme maybe a little bit out of the box. I don't really feel like I hear people talking about this so much. I think people talk about elevator pitches and they talk about taglines for your blog or website. And all those things are kind of in that same ballpark, but I haven't heard people talk about the theme idea. And so this may be something that you have to kind of think about and pause and really work through. We're going to talk about it in the Facebook group. That's going to be the question that we discuss related to audience this week. So again, you want to be in there, createifwriting.com/community. So what's going to be coming up in the next few weeks? We are going to talk about your ideal or perfect reader profile, and we're going to try to create one of those. We're also going to talk about how to figure out who your current readers are, and sometimes they're not your ideal. And so we need to figure out what to do when that happens, because I've had that happen. And then also how, once you've identified your perfect reader, how to find them and bring them back to your blog. Perfect audience. FIPA, how are you feeling? I hope you're not overwhelmed, but this is really giving you something to think about. I want to hear from you. You can give me a shout out on Twitter @KikiMojo. You can, again, dive into the Facebook group. You can send me an email, kirsten@kirstenoliphant.com. Head over to the show notes, leave comments, whatever, interact, talk to somebody about this, think through it, think about your perfect audience, think about yourself and who you are, because that step is so important and I think often missed in the things I see about finding your perfect audience. Because if you don't know yourself, it's going to be really hard to kind of know who you're going to attract, or you may be repelling people without knowing it because who you are doesn't match up with kind of your perfect audience. That's all for today. Thanks again so much to Jasmine Commerce for the music. And I'm so glad you're listening. I'm so glad for all the people who've joined the community and who have been talking to each other and talking to me. It's been really exciting to see some of the growth. So thank you guys so much. And I hope you have an inspired week.